everyone, this is Yami, your Latina next door, and I have the Latino engineer with me today for round 2 of our DIY plywood flooring. So in this video, we're going to be going over what we use to stain the floors and seal them. A few things we learned along the way because we made a couple of mistakes.
We did, but they don't look bad.
No, they don't look bad at all. But we're going to show you the entire process of how the Latino engineer did it. So this is what you've been waiting for.
Right, this is part 2 on how to finish your plywood floors.
So here is a look again at what the floors look like after we installed the plywood flooring. After they're installed, you want to prepare them for the stain. And what you want to do is you want to sand them down with 220 grit sandpaper. So for this, the Latino engineer used the same sander that he used in order to smooth out the ceilings once he removed the popcorn ceilings. We'll link to this sander in the description box below if you want to check it out. However, if you do not have one of these, you can use an orbital sander and that works just fine. And just note, we will be switching this sander out for our orbital sander later on in the video for a specific step, and this is the one that we use. We have this link below as well. Then what we did was choose a stain. It took us a little while to figure out what color we wanted to go to and what would work best with our style and the needs of our home. We ended up choosing the color Mocha by Minwax. We purchased all of our supplies at Lowe's, and in the area where they have the polyurethane, they have these applicators like this that you can use to apply the poly and the stain onto your floors. So naturally, we went with this option since this was our first time doing this. Using this method, it applies the stain nice and evenly and very easily because you're standing up and you're just basically mopping the floor. We did end up changing our method because we found that using this actually leaves a lot of stain on the floor if you do not wipe it off. Of course, we did not know this at the time, and the floors were a little bit darker than we had wanted to begin with. Also, a lot more stain on the floors meant the drying time for the stain took way longer than we had hoped. Sometimes they were still wet after several days of drying, and of course this would push back our progress and we would get delayed. So then we changed it out and used a lint-free cloth to apply the rest of the stain. Now keep in mind that this method will be a little bit harder on your back and on your knees. So you want to make sure you wear some knee pads for this. While it was a little bit harder to apply this way, we actually preferred this method better because as you can see a lot more of the grain of the wood by applying the stain in this method. And because you're wiping away excess stain as you go, the boards dry faster. Now before the next step, you want to make sure your floors are completely dry. And depending on how humid your home is or the area where you live, this will vary. After your floors are completely dry, you're going to want to go to the next step, which is applying 3 coats of polyurethane within 6 to 8 hours of each application. The polyurethane that we went with was the super fast drying polyurethane for floors by Minwax. Now this says you can recoat within 4 hours, and that's why we chose this because there was less waiting time between coats, but we still waited about 6 to 8 hours. This polyurethane comes in a satin, semi-gloss, and gloss finish. We chose the satin finish because we actually prefer floors that are not really shiny. So it took us a couple of different tries to try to figure out how to apply the poly in the best way that we saw fit. The first was with a brush. The Latino engineer basically just had the can right next to him. He would just dip his brush and then apply directly on the floors. Now, you want to make sure you use a brush that's meant for oil-based paints. So next, he decided to try the original application that he used for the stain, and that's using the sponge at the end of a pole or like a broom kind of attachment. He thought it would be very helpful in the application of this since it does spread the polyurethane very evenly. However, we did find that once you push the poly out and then come back with the sponge, as you see you going back and forth, you will actually get a small line where you stop the brush and pull it back. And sometimes it was really hard to try and even those out. But he did do his very best to even everything out and make everything look as smooth as possible. And unless you're actually looking for them, you don't even notice them. We just want to be really frank about what you may encounter if you do decide to choose this route. Now, one thing he did like, and he continued using for the entire polyurethane application, was using a small watering can to pour it over the floor in an S-shaped pattern, and then going back over it and smoothing it out across the floor. Here's what the floors look like after that poly has been applied. We wanted to make sure that they were sealed properly, so we did this 3 times, making sure we were within that 6 to 8 hour time period in between coats. Now, after that 3rd application, you need to wait at least 24 hours to allow everything to dry completely before you go to the next step. Here's a shot of what it looks like after it has that 3rd coat. You can't really see it in this shot, but the floors are pretty shiny and sometimes they have a little bit of bumps in them, and that is one reason why you want to sand them. Now here's a better shot. The floor looks wet, but it's actually not. This is after that 3rd coat, and as you know, I wanted it in a satin finish, and sanding it is a crucial part of getting it to that right sheen. So next we sanded the floors with 220 grit sandpaper, and we're using the orbital sander this time. And for this, you want to make sure you have your ears covered if you don't like loud noises. You got the proper face mask, knee pads, everything that you need, because it's going to be a little bit of tough work. The reason he went with this orbital sander instead of the longer one that he used earlier was this one actually lets you get in all those little crevices and corners and cracks and nooks, because it is very important that you sand absolutely every single part of that floor, because if not, when you apply the 4th and last layer of polyurethane, you're going to have small little peaks of shiny floor poking through where you did not sand it down. So that's very important. And you're probably thinking this looks absolutely terrible and why would you do this? And you're going to start freaking out at this point, because I certainly did. But trust the process. Even though you did all that work with the poly and now you're sanding it all, I promise you this is what makes these floors look amazing. So you do not want to skip this step. Then you want to remove all of that dust that you created from sanding the floors. You want to use a shop vac and make sure you get in all of those seams. And then after you do the shop vac, you want to go over everything with an old towel and make sure you remove any sanding dust. I will hand it to him. This was a ton of work and he would work well into the night getting these floors done. So hats off to him. We definitely appreciated his hard work. So the final step is to apply one last coat of polyurethane and let it cure for 72 hours before any use of that floor. And this is where the magic happens. As you can see, there's the sanded portion of the floor and then the portion with the last coat. And you can see that it just brings out that grain and that texture of that floor, and it allows you to see it so much better. So the method that worked the best for the polyurethane application was using that small watering can to pour the poly over the floors in an S shape and then coming over it with a wide brush. And the one thing you want to look out for and make sure when you're applying it this way is that you are smoothing out all of the poly that you may see. As you can see, there's a couple of droplets right there, and don't worry, he will get those. It's kind of hard to see when everything is wet, but getting all of those nice and smooth will give you a nice even finish. Now we wanted to also share a couple of specific to us situations that we had in the kitchen in case you might encounter something like this.
So since we're fixing to do the kitchen and we weren't going to be able to move the refrigerator back and forth without damaging the floors, I went ahead and stained and sealed the boards that were going to go underneath the refrigerator. And right now I'm just doing a dry fit before I miter cut these. And what I did was put like a 2-inch border around. That way the refrigerator is like cased out and has its own little profile. That way, even though when I go and finish the rest of the room, it's not going to line up exactly, but because it's cased out, it doesn't matter where the rest of the hardwood floors are going to look like.
It's going to be a nice little detail on the floor.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a little extra, and then I'll do the last finish of poly after they're all nailed down. And then we'll let it sit there and cure, and then I'll put the refrigerator, and then that way I can work the rest of the kitchen, no problem.
And we're going to do the same thing for the stove, right?
Yes, so I'm going to do that underneath the stove as well. So.
And obviously we wouldn't normally do this had we not been living in the house and actually had a refrigerator. If it was open, it wouldn't be necessary, but we thought we would go ahead and do this, right?
All right, it's because we still have to function in the kitchen and still use the refrigerator and still cook. You know, a new application, you just put all the hardwood floors down, stain everything, polyurethane everything, and then after it's all set and dry, then you can bring everything back in. But since we're living here, you know, we have all the stuff in the way, we kind of have to get creative on certain parts of the house.
And that's what that nook looks like with the mitered edges all cased out. So I'll take you around to see what those floors look like. As you can see, this is the kitchen floor that he was just finishing up. And you can see the little corners right there with the fridge where that went. And it actually, you can't really even see it that much. You can see it there on the bottom right. And it flows just fine with the rest of the kitchen, and it actually looks like the fridge is cased out. The floors are super smooth, and as you can see, it doesn't have that glaring wet look that it had before it was sanded. And this is what it looks like down the hall. I really do love how it looks. But as you can see on the left side, the kids' rooms are a little bit darker just because we applied them a little differently. The difference is a little bit more noticeable in person than on camera. But we're okay with this. All 3 kids' bedroom floors match, and they have doors to their rooms, so it's a little bit less noticeable that way anyways. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so that you can tune in to part 3, where we're going to be finishing off the floors with all of the baseboards and then show you how we take care of it. Also, don't forget to add all of your questions below because we will be doing a live video at the end of all 3 parts so that we can answer all of your questions on these plywood floors. That way you guys have a place to reference them in one video.
Yes, don't forget that, because we've had a ton of great questions that we're not answering in the comment section because we just want to wrap everything up so we can try to answer everybody's questions, because there's been some really good ones out there.
Right, and it's just, we just thought it'd be nice for there to be just one place you have to refer to whenever you're looking up those questions. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And don't forget, we have another channel, our Latinos Next Door channel, which we just started, so make sure you guys subscribe to it. I'll make sure to include a link in the description box so you can check it out. And we hope to see you guys in the next video. Until then, adios.